It's been just more than a year since the bombing at the Boston Marathon, but the memories and emotions of the day are still fresh in our minds. That's especially true for our next guests, Scott Helman and Jenna Russell, Boston Globe reporters and authors of the book Long Mile Home. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
So let's go back. Take us back to the day of the actual bombing. You were in the vicinity of Boston. What was going on?
Well, both of us were actually doing something else that day. I had gone to the marathon that morning, like so many people with my kids. It's such a great event. It's this wonderful holiday every spring in Boston, as many of your viewers know, because it's just so open. You can get to the race from anywhere. It's this family day. It's terrific. And so I had sort of done that, not as a journalist, but just as a guess as a dad, right, and as a person. And then, like so many other people, gradually got the news by text message and by phone call, and the gravity of it soon became clear.
Sure. And Jenna, what were you doing?
I was working on a story that day, just sitting in a coffee shop with my laptop, and started to hear kind of a murmur of people talking, and I had a bad feeling and went on to boston.com, our website, and saw these reports from the finish line that were filtering in, very fragmented from some of our colleagues. And very quickly, as Scott says, started to gather myself, steeling myself to what was going to be a very long, very demanding series of work days.
And then what inspired you both to write the book?
Well, we felt the Globe's performance during that week and beyond was so extraordinary, and we had such a strong foundation of work that it only made sense to build on it, to capture it and bring it all together, and then to go deeper and try to tell the story in a very human way through the eyes of different people who were close to the events.
Sure. And Scott, why don't you expand on that and explain to us how the book is kind of set up?
Sure. So, as Jenna said from the beginning, we wanted to make this about people and not just about this horrible thing that had happened. And so we set out to find 5 people who we thought represented these different groups of people who were most affected. Because we felt like everyone paid attention to this story very closely. A lot of people in Boston really lived it in a way. And so it would be familiar to a lot of people, but we wanted to really go deeper than that and really kind of follow, this core group of characters, not just of that horrible week, but also the weeks afterward when the cameras turn off and everyone else goes away, the attention fades. That to us was some of the most interesting stuff about this, right?
Sure.
Because for a lot of people, it was over that week, but for, the people who were most deeply affected, it wasn't over that week, and in some ways it'll never be over.
Sure. Let's put up some pictures on the screen, and we'll talk about each of the characters and how they were affected. Jen, if you want to start with this.
Sure. So this is Heather Abbott, a young woman from Rhode Island who was at the race that day. She went every year with her friends, and when the second bomb exploded, she was standing outside the door of a restaurant, was very severely hurt. She actually made it to the hospital. Surgeons were able to save her leg that night, and she woke up Tuesday and believed she had been spared and that she was one of the lucky ones. But over the course of that week, her condition deteriorated, and she was ultimately faced with a pretty unimaginable decision about whether to keep her leg or to amputate, in which she did ultimately choose amputation.
Wow, and you had an opportunity to talk to her?
We spent a lot of time with Heather, and she's an incredibly, I don't use this word lightly, but inspiring person. Her strength, her perseverance, and also her honesty in sharing with us even the most difficult moments for her.
Very good. And the next one was Dave Mcgilvery. He was the Boston Marathon director.
So Dave Mcgilvery is a legendary figure in Boston and New England. He's put on the Boston Marathon for many, many years. And this is sort of his baby. He controls every aspect of it. He's there from the beginning to the end. He knows, exactly how many porta potties are in this location. He is the Bible of information on this event. And so we thought, this is a running event. This draws in runners from all over the world. This is a very special event in that community. So we thought having him be part of the book would give a window sort of into that world and how important this was, not just to the city, but to the sort of running community beyond Boston.
Sure, okay, and we'll move along. The next one is kind of the story of a police officer at the end of the finish line.
That's right, a very young Boston police officer, Shana Catone, in her 20s, who grew up in New York, was a teenager when 9/11 happened, and she came to Boston, fell in love with the city, in part because of how safe she felt here, and she was at the finish line that day and was instrumental in saving some lives, and has been very deeply affected by what happened still.
Okay, and the next picture is of Krystle Campbell.
So Krystle is tragically one of the 3 people who were killed at the finish line that day. She's 29 years old. She's from a working class family north of Boston. we like to describe her sort of as the every woman of Boston in a lot of ways. Born and bred there, a big Boston sports fan, always at Patriots games, Red Sox games, a very generous spirit, and somebody who, has left a very big hole in the life, of course, of her family and her friends.
And she's in the picture with the
She's the one in the
Hawaiian
pattern dress, exactly.
pattern dress.
Yes.
And then lastly, we have David King, who has a pretty interesting story. He's a surgeon that actually finished the race.
He did. He ran the race that day. He's an experienced marathoner, and he ran it in a little over 3 hours. And then he was just reaching home with his wife and his 2 young children when he got word of the bombings by text message, grabbed a pair of scrubs and a banana, and rushed to Mass General Hospital, where he immediately started operating on some of the most seriously injured patients.
Wow. Scott, let me ask you, when you put all of this together, what was the most difficult part of it all?
I think the most difficult part for us is, we wanted to have this book out for the anniversary, and in doing that, that makes for a very compressed time frame. And so really within weeks of the bombing, we have to show up to people who have been the most affected by it and say, we know you're trying to move on, we know you're trying to heal and focus on that, but can you bring us back to this terrible place and this terrible time and revisit that with us? And Jenna and I both had a series of very difficult conversations, as you can imagine, with victims, survivors, family members, and those things stay with you.
Sure, I bet it does. And lastly, Jenna, what do you want readers to take away from the book?
Well, a number of things. So many people have told us that they thought they knew this story inside and out. It was so well covered. But they read the book and they say, I can't believe how much is here that's new, or that gives me new insight or illuminates things I hadn't thought about. And the other part, I think, for us, we want it to be a document of history, but beyond that, in telling these very human stories, I think people can connect and feel more deeply, and hopefully in some way that's a cathartic thing.
Sure, you can get a different perspective on it and what happened. And I'm assuming the book is available just about everywhere?
It is.
Very good. The name of it again is on the screen, A Long Mile Home. Thank you both for being here.